Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, the award-winning cannabis news podcast brought to you by VoteProPot.com.
The NFL's new testing policy has started on what date? 420. Newsweek has a 420 issue that says that countless lives have been cut short by marijuana. We're going to find out what the heck that's all about. And the White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, once again was non-committal about whether Joe Biden will sign a legalization bill or not. Howdy doody, everybody, and welcome to another episode. Welcome to our special Post-420 episode of VoteProPot-Cast. How you doing, Jay?
I'm doing great. How you doing, buddy? Did you have a good 420?
I had a wonderful 420, and I had an even better 420 Eve, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. First, I want to mention that this episode of VoteProPot-Cast is being sponsored by our good friends at cannabis.net. And that happens to be Jay's and my favorite source of news and information from the world of cannabis. Don't you agree?
Absolutely.
I mean, lots of good stuff on that. Check out cannabis.net at, wait for it, cannabis.net.
Oh, that was easy. Did you memorize that, or did you have it written down?
I had it written down.
Right,
I have everything written down. I have my name written down.
Just
so I don't have to sing happy birthday to remember it.
That's right.
This 420 Eve, as I mentioned, we spent with our good friends Jimmy Young and Dan French and some other great folks over at Pro Cannabis Media.
That was fun.
They had their 420 Eve special. And you can check that out on... Where can they find that, Jay?
On YouTube, you can find it at Pro Cannabis Media. Just search...
Pro Cannabis Media 420 Eve Special.
That's it. Just do a search on YouTube.
It's pretty funny. I mean, we had a lot of laughs. We were just, and there was a lot of guests on there. He was on for several hours and did some more on 420 Day.
Right.
And, Pro Cannabis Media is just starting to take off as really the network, of news and information and articles from the world of cannabis.
And Jimmy Young's a great guy, man, and he's working so hard to make this happen. And it was a 2-hour show, 8 to 10, and we closed it down 9:30 to 10. So if you want to see us, and you click on that link, go to 1:30 and you'll catch our group. Yeah. He had 4 different groups, but it was a lot of fun.
We were on with a fellow named Dave Briggs. He is a former CNN and I think Fox News journalist who is now hosting a web show called Conversation, and which he just wants to talk about things that aren't being talked about, especially in the media. Yeah. And he would know.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We were on with another fellow, Jimmy's good friend, Dave Rabinovich. The guy is just, if you like dry humor.
Yeah, he's great. He's great.
That's what happened this past week. And next week we have some great stuff in store, right, Jay?
Yeah, we got an interview coming up with the producer named Aaron O'Hearn. And you may have heard of this. It's a new movie out, a documentary called Weediatrics. I haven't watched it yet. I'll look at it this week before we interview her, but it's on Amazon Prime and Apple TV and Google Play, and I think wherever you get your videos. And it's a covert medical mission that follows a group of all-American families on their clandestine quest to acquire and use medical cannabis illegally to help their extremely sick children. I've seen clips from it. It's really moving. These are parents with really devastating kids with devastating illnesses, and only cannabis, CBD, and THC is really helping them, and it's illegal in their states. So it's about how
they're faced with the consequences, which could be dire.
It could be them losing and their families.
Kids, yes, including losing their kids or losing their kids to a disease. So that's the choice they have to face, and it's a very compelling documentary, and we are very anxious to talk with Aaron about it. So definitely check us out next week.
You can turn us off this week, but definitely check us out.
Well, don't do that.
Don't do that yet. Okay.
We got a lot of cool stuff to cover.
We do.
And
Great stuff.
And you're already here, so
yeah, what the hell?
Just keep it running.
If If you enjoy the show, we'd love to hear from you. Send us your thoughts at VoteProPot.com/contact or send us an email at podcast@VoteProPot.com.
Here's a question, and I don't think anybody really knows the answer to this. Will President Biden sign a legalization bill if such a bill reaches his desk, or will he veto it? We don't know. For the second day in a row, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki basically dodged the question, declined to say one way or another. In a press briefing on Tuesday, she was asked whether to expect him to sign a legalization bill, because, of course, Chuck Schumer is moving forward. Right. He's told us to expect legalization bill coming soon. Mm-hmm. First, he said it would be shortly. Then he said it would be soon. I don't know what that means, but they're working on it. He's working on it with Cory Booker and some other Senate leaders to craft a bill. What's Biden going to do when it gets there? Psaki had this to say about it.
Rescheduling cannabis as a Schedule II drug would allow for researchers to study its positive and negative effects. He wants to look at that. He, of course, supports decriminalizing marijuana use. He supports leaving decisions up to the states. And he supports legalizing medicinal marijuana. But he'll look at the research once that's concluded.
So, in other words, if she'd had it on cue cards, the cue cards would have just said blah, 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 blah.
Well,
blah.
It's funny, Phil. I watched this on YouTube, and, it's her daily briefing, and it was 420, so multiple reporters asked the question. Right. And she read that freaking card verbatim every time. Right. Well, what bothers me most about it, though, is this. He doesn't want to deschedule it. That's clear. That part of it's clear. So that's what I'm worried about. Schumer's bill is going to definitely, going to deschedule it, not reschedule.
Yeah, not reschedule.
And President Biden wants to reschedule it to Schedule II, which is just bullshit. That serves no purpose whatsoever, as far as I'm.
And in fact, it's worse than worthless, because as we've talked about on this show several times, what rescheduling will do is simply legislate legal businesses out of business. Right. Because they have to recalibrate everything to be a Schedule II drug. It doesn't, remove the criminality of cannabis.
It's still illegal.
It's still illegal.
Without a prescription. Right.
Right. So cannabis dispensaries that, I'm on in the Maryland medical marijuana program, I don't need a prescription to get cannabis products. Right. But you will.
Right. Exactly. So how does that go? It's going backwards for some of us.
It's going backwards. So it's
let me run this by you. What is the reason? President Biden's a guy that's, I don't mean this to sound disrespectful, but he's pretty wishy-washy, and he's changed his stance, moving further left on a lot of things since he's been elected, kind of following suit with the folks that are pushing and that really drive the agenda. So why is this the case? And a couple things came to mind for me thinking about this today. One is his son. He's got this drug-addicted loser son. That sounds terrible. But the guy has a really shady past when it comes to drugs. That's one thing. It's his age, partly.
You're just reporting the news, Jim.
Well, the news that no one hears. And the other thing is, do you think maybe he's concerned about revisiting or waking up the whole situation? Because a lot of people are young and don't know this. The 1994 crime bill was his bill. Oh, yeah. And that bill is, has been credited by many for contributing to this mass incarceration, especially of people of color.
Right, right. And it's because that crime bill took away a lot of the judge's discretion on sentencing.
Right. That's right.
So, it instituted a lot more mandatory sentencing. I think the three strikes rule was, and
treated crack differently than powder cocaine, didn't it? And there's just a whole bunch of stuff.
So. And people are spending, I wonder. Now, I hadn't thought about that from that angle, Jay, and it's interesting that you put that.
It popped into my head today.
So what you're saying or proposing is perhaps he doesn't want to backtrack on his own bad bill.
Well, I think the press is pretty cozy with Biden, obviously, but if he all of a sudden goes full on, yep, let's do legalization, it kind of opens the doors for certain press to come out and say, wow, this is what you did 25 years ago, which is night and day from this. You were putting people in prison for minor offenses, and you were hailing this bill. I mean, it was like your great accomplishment for a while. So I don't know. Whatever it is, it's odd to me. And, he's up against Schumer. And here's a little clip of Schumer on the same day, okay? 420. This is what Chucky had to say.
I believe the time has come to end the federal prohibition on marijuana in this country. And I'm working with Senators Booker and Wyden on legislation to do just that. My thinking on this issue has evolved. A number of states, including very recently my home state of New York, have legalized the recreational use of marijuana for adults, and those experiments, by and large, have been a success. The doom and gloom predictions when states like Colorado or Oregon went forward and decriminalized and legalized never occurred. In state after state, through ballot initiatives and constitutional amendments, the American people are sending a clear message that they want this policy changed.
Night and day.
Night and day. And you know what he used? He used the word that politicians love to use, evolved.
Yeah.
He's not flip-flopping.
No.
He has, when 70% of the voters are telling you that the policy that you once endorsed is not the policy that they want, you either evolve or you're going against
you're out of there.
Yeah. Right. You're or at least, you're going against the wishes of a large and 70%, nothing. No issue gets 70%.
Right.
If you get 56, 57%,
you're doing great.
You're doing pretty good.
Yeah,
and this divided electorate, 70%, that's a landslide.
That's a landslide. And what's interesting about New York? A stat I saw today. This was a study that was done a couple of years ago, but it holds true today. They did a study on the highest consumption of cannabis by cities, large cities in the world. Mm-hmm. New York was number one by a landslide. Was it? No, it was 77.5 metric tons. And that is compared. Number two was
metric tons.
Number two is Karachi.
Oh, okay, long metric tons.
Yeah. Number two is Karachi. Then New Delhi. Los Angeles was fourth. Now the one behind it, Karachi, is 42. So they're almost twice as much as number two. So anyway,
where is Karachi?
Oh, hell if I know. You would ask me that. I'm not sure.
Folks, if you know where Karachi is, send us an email or send us a message. I don't know. Or either that or I'm just going to, if only there was a device where you could look stuff up.
It's in Pakistan.
Oh, Pakistan.
Thank you, Google. Yeah, Pakistan. I know once I read it, I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So anyway.
And you knew I was going to call you on it, right?
So Chucky is looking for some serious cash. I mean, they are going to raise billions, literally.
Well, yeah, and New York State needs it, but aside from the money, and I know you can't take the money out of politics, and you can't take the politics out of politics, but at some level, I got to ask myself, do I agree with this guy or not? And on most things, yeah, probably not.
Right.
On this, I'm with him word for word on exactly what he just said.
Right, and it's not just that he's evolved in his stance. He's doing it. He's writing a bill. I mean, he's doing it, moving it forward. He's not just talking about it. He's doing it.
And not letting. And if it is the case that Biden is allowing his own personal political considerations to get in the way of the will of 70% of the electorate, that's bad, man. That's just not. I don't know.
Even so many Republican legislators have evolved. It's odd to me that President Biden is still kind of standing in the rain on this one.
Yeah. Matt Gaetz is way out ahead of Joe Biden
Right.
on this issue.
It seems odd, but anyway.
It's very odd.
We will keep an eye on it.
We will keep an eye on that. You're a football fan, Jay, right?
I am indeed. And this is interesting.
Is there a particular football team that you root for? And what is the name of that football team?
The Washington football team.
Oh, the football team.
The football team that's in Washington.
The football team that is the football team.
Those are my guys.
They shall be called the football team that is called the football team.
In Washington. Yes, that's right. Well, this is staying in our theme of 420. On 420, the NFL opened its random drug test window. And by the collective bargaining agreement that was agreed to last year, the players will no longer be tested for THC or cannabis from April 20th. I thought it was kind of interesting they did it from April 20th to August 9th. So basically in the off season, you can smoke all the weed you want. Okay. That's cool.
Just in the off season.
Well, it's in the off season, but there's also other changes. Players will be tested for THC once training camp opens in August. However, the new CBA, which is the collective bargaining agreement, has also raised a threshold for a positive marijuana test from 35 nanograms to 150 nanograms. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm not exactly sure what that means. But I guess you can smoke 3 joints instead of a half a joint or something. I don't know.
So wait, you're not a doctor?
No, I'm not. I just play one. And it eliminates suspensions for positive drug tests. Instead, the NFL will issue fines for as much as 3 weeks' pay. And the NFL will be moving away from severe discipline for marijuana use to approach a more focused treatment plan for the players who are hooked on the evil weed.
Hooked.
If player tests positive during training camp, if a player tests positive during training camp, his test is reviewed by a board of medical professionals appointed by both the Players League and the owners, and the board then decides that the player needs treatment. Who needs treatment for smoking weed? What? The NFL previous guidelines on cannabis usage were much more harsh. The writer said much more harsher, but that doesn't sound right to me. So
this is a journalist saying that?
Yes, this is a journalist. I'm not even going to tell you where I got this. All players were tested at least once during the offseason. Also, 10 players from each team were selected for tests each week. So, I mean, that's pretty, you got a pretty good odds of getting busted.
Yeah.
10 players, every team, every week at random were tested. Yeah. And one positive test previously resulted in a referral to the substance abuse program. A second positive test resulted in a fine of 2 game checks. A third violation was a fine of 4 game checks, and a fourth violation was a 4-game suspension. A fifth violation was a 10-game suspension, and a 6th violation resulted in a 1-year ban. Now think, how stupid does a player have to be to get busted 6
times? I think at that point you got no one to blame it yourself, but it's still a screwed up policy, and I'm glad they changed it. It is not what we would like to see. We would like to see them just take cannabis off the list entirely.
Tested, absolutely. And all the leagues are kind of doing this. All the leagues are moving forward with this, so
this is progress,
sports.
and we'll take it.
Yep.
So, Ricky Williams might still be playing. Well, no, he's getting a little old, but
he's getting old. Yeah.
But
long in the tooth to be a running back, I think.
Yeah. But at any rate, so we'll take the progress. Well done and well timed on the case of
420.
the NFL 420. You know how Schumer has been telling us that a legalization bill is, first he said one was coming shortly.
Right.
Then he said one was coming soon.
That's different?
I don't know.
Okay.
What soon or shortly means.
Nomenclature.
But apparently he's been working with Cory Booker of New Jersey and Ron Wyden of Oregon to come up with a legalization bill. And I don't know what's in that legalization bill. Nobody does. Probably Chuck and Corey and Ron don't even know yet.
Yeah.
But I think at a minimum, that bill would contain descheduling.
I would think, yeah.
And expungement. I think it would contain a lot of what's what was in the MORE Act. Remember the MORE Act?
Yeah, that's right.
Reinvesting in communities that have been hard impacted by the war on drugs, that sort of thing. So he's telling us, stay tuned. One is coming soon or shortly or in the not too distant future. But another key Senate figure, Banking Committee Chairman Sherrod Brown of Ohio, is saying, as far as the Safe Banking Act, which passed, I believe, on 420 or the day before 420.
Passed the House, right.
Not so fast. At least on that part. The Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act passed earlier this week. And what that does is remove the federal penalties for financial institutions that do business with companies in the cannabis industry. Right now, if you do business with a company in the cannabis business, you're going to be penalized, and as a result, many or most cannabis, or I would guess all cannabis businesses, operate on a purely cash basis, which is not safe, and it's not fair, and it's not secure, and it's bullshit of the first order. But he's saying, don't hold your breath on the Safe Banking Act because he's got other priorities. Okay, so I understand. I don't know why he can't, work on, and chew gum at the same time. Said, he's saying, quote, this committee's been too much about Wall Street and not enough about housing, not enough about rural and urban affairs and people's everyday economic lives. You mean like not getting busted for weed?
Right.
Is that part of their economic life?
Not going to jail for nothing?
Yeah. Not getting robbed because you got to take bags of cash to the bank.
Right. Your dispensary owner. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what is so pressing that he can't just, put a bill on the floor to debate.
Well, my question too, Phil, and you're more of an expert than me on this, the politics of it is Schumer's pushing so hard for this bill, but I don't think they'll have any problem with the House agreeing to the bill because the House is already passing bills, right?
House is way out ahead.
They're way out ahead. But how much trouble is Schumer going to have getting a positive vote on this in the Senate? I mean, I still think that's a really big uphill battle with the numbers they have right now. Are they going to have that many Republicans sign on to this?
Well, I guess you don't know until you put it on the floor. I mean, but if you put it to a vote and it doesn't pass, well, okay, then it went through the due legislative process and it didn't make it. So then you go back and you find out what those senators' complaints are. You alter the bill. You debate it. This is the democratic process. It's not the democratic process just to say, well, we don't think this is, to just throw up your hands and say, what about the children, and leave it at that,
Which is what this guy's doing.
We're tired of that. But I think there's another consideration that may have something to do with this. And that is the fact that, and I think Schumer believes this too, that the Safe Banking Act is kind of getting out ahead of the legalization bill. And when I say that, I mean that if you get the Safe Banking Act to pass and you get, the Republicans on board and it passes, then when it comes time for the legalization bill, a lot of these, not just Republicans, but anti-drug senators could then dig in their heels and say, hey, we gave you the Banking Act. What more do you want?
That's a good point.
Yeah,
I thought of that.
And I think Schumer wants to get the comprehensive bill passed and let the banking bill be an add-on to it. So if that's the strategy, then maybe he's on to something. I don't know if that's a fair assessment, but I think that may be part of what Schumer and maybe Sherrod Brown are considering.
Interesting.
That getting, it's like giving the anti-drug coalition too big of a bone, and rather than holding out for the big kahuna. So that's one reason.
Well, speaking of the anti-cannabis coalition, you kind of assume that the Republicans are the problem, and that's been traditionally the case, I guess you could say. But we're seeing a lot of movement on that.
Less and less so this day.
Less and less so. But I have an article here out of Newsweek. Okay, it came out on 420. Actually,
not exactly a Republican screed.
I was going to say, you don't get much more left-wing than Newsweek. And for that matter, the gentleman that wrote this, Dr. Kevin Sabet, I don't think that's how you pronounce his name. He's a former senior drug policy advisor for Obama.
All right.
So this guy's left-wing as you can get. This article is called, the title of this article is, Countless Lives Have Been Cut Short by Marijuana. So I thought, okay, this is coming out the day after 420. This must be just a lead-in, something to get me to read it, a clickbait kind of thing.
Right.
But no, this article is troubling for us, for those of us on the pro-cannabis side. The article goes on to tell the story of an obviously troubled young man named Andy who eventually hung himself. Over the course of 5 years, Andy suffered a downward spiral in life due to his crippling addiction to marijuana. Those years were punctuated by calls to suicide hotlines, hospitalizations in at least 5 different mental health facilities, and 2 sentences of court-ordered mental health treatment. In 2014, at the age of 31, Andy was found hanging from a tree, dead by suicide, and he left a note which said, quote, "My soul is already dead. Marijuana killed my soul and ruined my brain," unquote. So the article goes on to talk about this, and it is just as this guy is, people are addicted to cannabis, and it's killing people. Now, this is a tragic story. This guy had PTSD. He was in Afghanistan or Iraq or somewhere, and he had mental health problems since he was a teenager, depression and so forth. And I feel horrible for this guy. But really, would you blame this on cannabis and write an article featuring this on 420?
Well, and the word that I stumble across is countless. I'm counting one.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Okay. That's easy to count.
Well, and it's a chicken and the egg thing. I mean, I think, sure, cannabis, the guy used cannabis and used a lot of it. But what came first? I think the mental illness did, and that's terrible and it's tragic. And I feel horrible for this person, this guy, Andy's family. It's very sad. But the question is, do you blame it on cannabis? Really? I mean, is that really they're making this out to be, this is the reason this guy hung himself, was because he used cannabis.
And where is the science behind it? We talk about people being anti-science. Where is the science behind this? Where is the research that says that people who smoke a lot of marijuana become depressed and suicidal?
Yeah, right.
There isn't any.
Not much, or not.
There
not
isn't any.
Yeah. Now, we've had a lot of people in recent months, including Faye, our health and wellness correspondent, who don't use cannabis anymore because they didn't like it, or it changed their body in some way. And that's fine. I got no problem with that. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not a heavy user, neither are you. I mean, no. We're not. We're just not. But that's not the point.
We are responsible users of an adult product.
Yeah. Anyway, I just this caught my eye. And
now, were there any other statistics presented?
The only
in
thing
this article?
They did mention a study that it was done at Yale, and they claim.
I see.
They claim, it's possible that they claim that there was one such study that shows that marijuana exacerbates PTSD symptoms. Now, I've never heard that before. I've heard the opposite.
I have heard the opposite too.
But, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a researcher, and I'm not a PhD, so I don't know what to make of it. But they do source a study that was done by Yale at some point that claims this is the case. Now, again, to me, it all goes back to what comes first, chicken or the egg. Was this guy mentally ill first and then happened to use marijuana or maybe some other drugs?
Well, and
or was he using
there are
drugs?
Other stories. You can come up with stories. There was a young man on the West Coast somewhere who had, 5 times more of an edible than was, dosed on the package. And he freaked out,
right,
and ended up jumping out a window.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I remember that story. I do.
So, yeah,
it happens.
It gets you high, and
too
if
high
you're
in that case,
and if you're too high and you're unstable to begin with or prone to it, bad things can happen.
Right.
Just ask Maureen Dowd what it's like when you have too much cannabis of an edible. It can overwhelm you, but that's irresponsible use.
Right.
These people are being irresponsible.
That can happen with alcohol and so many other substances,
Yeah, I'm sure there are people who had too much coffee and the next morning they're up on the roof of the Magnum.
Right.
6 dead and they blame Marine training. What the hell?
Right. Well, he's the guy writing the article here says, these are but small sampling of the countless tragic examples of lives cut short because of marijuana. That's
countless.
It's just
countless examples.
This just shocked me. I read it a couple times. Yeah. I'm like, what? So anyway, I think it's important people know that.
There's a term for that kind of journalism.
And real quick, I'll just throw this out to you. It's odd to me that the liberal press, and this is a generalization, but I see so many negative stories about cannabis on CNN's website, on Newsweek's website, Times website. I don't understand it. I
think on our We Talk News 420 Eve special, we were talking, remember, with Dave Briggs, and he is former CNN, former Fox News, and he said, you know what? It's not just cannabis. It's any topic. Negativity sells. He says
it leads, right? Exactly.
It leads, right? And all of the good things that come from, THC, CBD, other cannabis use, nobody cares about that in the news. They want to know.
It's not clickbait.
They want the dog bites or the man bites dog story.
That's right.
And it's that's about the best you can say for it. But it's I think it's despicable and irresponsible journalism.
Most of it is these days.
Yeah. So, and I don't consume any of it anymore.
No, me either.
And oddly enough, neither does Dave.
Yeah, that's right. And that's his
he doesn't
profession.
watch it. He does. And he's, or it has been him. I'm not sure. He seems a little unsure as to whether he wanted to
He's
continue.
A funny guy, and we really do recommend you watch our clip on there because he's an interesting and entertaining guy.
Well, folks, I guess we've come to an end of another fabulous episode. Jay, well done once again.
It was fun. Well done.
Yeah. So, if you like the show, and I hope you did, go to Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star rating. Tell some friends about us. I usually say tell a friend. Don't tell a friend. Tell some friends. You probably know 3 or 4 people who are, into this kind of thing. If nothing else, for a few laughs.
At our expense.
We'll take it. We don't care. And if you have comments or questions or corrections or information that you think our listeners ought to know, just check in with us. How would they do that, Jay?
Well, we've been getting inundated lately with people that want to come on the show. And you've probably noticed that we have been doing more and more interviews and less news. I would love to ask our listeners, Phil, if they would write us at podcast@VoteProPot.com. That's pod with a D. And let us know, how you feel about that, because it has kind of changed our format a little bit. But we've had a lot of really, interesting people in the industry reach out to us and want to come on the show, and we really enjoy that, don't we? We enjoy interviewing.
I do, yeah.
I do too. I really like it, but it takes away the news part. So let us know how you feel about that. Drop us a line at podcast@VoteProPot.com or call our message line. That's a great way, and we'll play it on the show, 240-257-2441. Let us know if you feel one way or the other, whether you enjoy the news more or the interviews, right?
Yeah, we would love to hear from you. And as always, check us out on our social media platforms. Go to Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, and do a search for Vote Pro Pot.